A lone girl sprints through a darkened gym, chased by a masked entity that moves without sound. Doors slam shut. Lights explode. Every turn leads her closer to something ancient. A whisper calls her name from behind the mirror. Suddenly, she's no longer in her world. Torches burn. A ghost in a cracked white mask steps forward, voice like wind scraping bone. He threatens her. No escape, no second chances. Just as his blade falls, time bends. A man in red-lined armor crashes in, light exploding from his hands. Death recoils. But something still follows. Keep watching. Nothing here is what it seems. I thought staying late at the university gym would help me clear my head. Finals were crushing me, and I figured the quiet would help me breathe. The air was still and heavy, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound besides my footsteps. My name's Brielle. Short black hair, always tied back, glasses slipping from my nose. I've always been the kind to push myself past exhaustion. I had the whole place to myself that night, or so I believed, until the lights started flickering, and didn't stop. I paused at the bench press, the mirrors fogging even though the air was cold. I wiped my lens, turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. A figure at the far end of the gym, near the fire exit, not moving. He was too tall, cloaked in a black robe that touched the floor. His mask was white, cracked, with strange markings that seemed to shift when I blinked. My breath caught. I stepped back slowly. He took one step forward, and every light in the gym blew out at once. I ran. Past the lockers, into the hall, but the doors wouldn't open. The air grew hot, then cold, my ears ringing like I was underwater. Every mirror I passed showed me running, but behind me, his reflection never blinked. I slammed into the yoga room door and fell through. But it wasn't a room anymore. Dirt filled my mouth, smoke stung my eyes. I stood in the middle of a narrow path lined with wooden signs and straw roofs. The sky was deep orange. Bells rang in the distance. I had fallen into another time. There were people, villagers in heavy clothes, muttering prayers, holding torches. They walked through me, as if I wasn't really there. At the town square, a woman was tied to a post. Flames circled her feet. She didn't scream. She was already gone. Then I saw him again. Same mask, same robe. Only now he held a rusted blade shaped like a crescent moon, dragging it behind him through the ash. His head turned toward me like he'd been waiting. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. He raised the blade and stepped forward, fire bending around him. I fell backward, hit something warm. Someone pulled me up, a man taller than the ghost, dressed in a deep gray cloak with red lining. His name was Elian. His eyes burned gold, and when he raised his hand, the ghost recoiled, screaming without sound. Beside him stood a girl, Annis, maybe 16, eyes glowing silver. She whispered words that shattered the sky. Everything around us broke like glass, and I was gone. I woke up on the locker room floor, covered in sweat and dirt, a shallow cut across my palm. No one believed me. Security said I never left. But sometimes, when I walk past the mirror near the exit, I see three reflections, mine, his, and hers. One watching, one waiting, one warning. I kept replaying the moment over and over as we walked. The way that cloaked figure had stared through me like I was nothing. I should have been shaking, but my body felt strangely light. Maybe it was the air here, or maybe I hadn't truly processed what had happened yet. No one spoke for a while. We moved past twisted trees with hollow bark and stone walls covered in ivy I didn't recognize. The man who had saved me, Elias, walked ahead with careful steps, as if the earth itself might shift under him. Beside me, a girl no older than 17 stayed quiet. She had freckles, a determined expression, and a blade-shaped pendant that glowed faintly. She caught me looking but didn't say anything. We finally reached an old gate made of thick iron vines. Elias placed a hand on the lock and closed his eyes. The gate clicked and creaked open without force. I didn't ask how. I didn't want to know. Inside was a courtyard, empty but humming with something that made the skin on my arms tighten. The girl spoke for the first time. Her name was Wren. She said nothing more than that, then followed Elias into a narrow corridor. I was about to step through when I saw it. A reflection in the puddle by my feet. Not mine. A figure standing behind me, too close. I turned fast. Nothing. Only wind and the slow sway of the trees. That night, Elias finally explained. This wasn't just another place. It was a pocket of time, broken off from the rest. I had fallen through during the moment the masked ghost tried to pull me in. Ren had seen it happen before. Not to many, and not all survived. He asked what I remembered from the moment I blacked out. I told him the mask. The way the black dots moved like they were alive. The way it didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared. Ren leaned forward. She said that mask belonged to a guardian that went rogue. Once meant to protect time fractures, now it hunted people who slipped into them, feeding off fear, replacing memories. I didn't believe it then. Not really. But the more I listened, the more I understood. They brought me to a stone room with carvings on the wall. Maps, or warnings maybe. I traced one line and the wall shivered under my touch. Elias stopped me, said the fractures were drawn there for a reason, said even touching the wrong path could bring something through. The air grew colder, lights dimmed. From the far end of the room came a sound, dragging, scraping like someone walking with broken legs. I didn't wait for a signal. I moved back. Elias stepped forward. He muttered something I couldn't understand. The carvings behind him shimmered, then settled. The sound stopped, but the tension didn't leave the room. Later, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, remembering the library, the rain, the page that turned itself. I wasn't even sure how long ago that was now. Time felt strange here. Ren finally asked what my name was. I told her. She didn't smile, just nodded and said if I wanted to survive, I had to stop waiting for someone to save me. Then she walked off. In the dark, I heard the mask again. Not a voice, just a breath. Just close enough to make my skin crawl. I realized then I hadn't escaped, I'd been chosen, and whatever it was, it still knew where to find me. I thought it would end that night in the cellar, but somehow it didn't. I woke up lying on stone, cold against my cheek, lit by flickering candlelight. The smell of wax and damp earth clung to me. For a long second, I didn't breathe. The ceiling above me was curved like a tunnel, carved roughly, ancient. My jacket was gone, and so was the flashlight. Across the room, someone moved. A girl, around my age, was chained to the wall. She looked at me, not startled, but tired, as if she'd already seen me 100 times. Her name was Ellen. She barely whispered it, voice cracked, like she hadn't spoken in days. She wasn't from my time, that was obvious. The way she spoke, the fabric of her dress, the way she flinched when I asked simple questions. I tried to stand, but my knees buckled. Someone had taken my shoes too. I felt every rock beneath my feet. Elin motioned to keep quiet. Then I heard it. Steps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the corridor. The man who entered wasn't old, but there was something wrong about his face. Not disfigured, just off. Like it couldn't decide on one emotion. He looked at Elin, then at me, and didn't speak. Instead, he dragged a wooden stool and sat between us, watching. I glanced at Elin. Her eyes had gone vacant, like she was somewhere else. I tried to speak again, but he raised his hand and tilted his head slightly, as if studying how I moved when afraid. Then the candles blew out on their own. I thought it was wind at first, but there wasn't a breeze. The silence stretched. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat echo in that stone chamber. When the light returned, he was standing. And he wasn't alone. Another figure stood behind him, a woman. Her skin was pale, almost blue, eyes rimmed in darkness. She didn't walk. She just appeared closer every time I blinked. Aylin began to chant under her breath. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel them vibrate through the walls. The man snapped his fingers and her voice stopped. That's when a third person rushed in. A boy, maybe 19, face scratched, holding nothing but a cracked mirror. He looked at me first, then at Elin. His name was Joel. He wasn't supposed to be here either. We had both fallen through time, but on different nights. He had been trapped for longer and somehow learned to survive. Joel shouted something at the spirit woman. Her form flickered. The mirror. It wasn't just glass, it was old, and the reflection inside it didn't match the room. It showed fire and a door. Joel thrust it toward her. She hissed. Not screamed, hissed like wind escaping from under floorboards. The room shook, stones cracked. The man's face twisted like it was melting into another one. I crawled toward Elin, fumbled with the chain. Joel reached us and snapped the lock open with a stone. We didn't look back, just ran. Past rooms I didn't recognize, through doorways that didn't belong to this century. Time folded around us. Candles burned backward, paintings blurred. Joel pushed me through a narrow wooden archway, then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was outside, on the street. Lights, cars, the present. Ellen wasn't with us. Joel stood beside me, shaking. He said she chose to stay behind to seal the rift. I didn't know what to say. Now every mirror I pass, I check twice. Sometimes I think I see her. Not sad, not angry, just watching. And the cellar door that started all of this, it's gone. Bricked over. No one believes me, but I can still feel the stone floor on my cheek when I close my eyes. And the silence. Always the silence. I never liked old houses, especially ones with too many locked doors. But I followed Devon and Elle anyway. We were supposed to meet someone about antique maps for a class project, and the woman lived in this crumbling mansion deep in the woods. She wasn't home when we arrived. The door was slightly open, and Devon, of course, walked right in. I stood by the porch, uneasy. There was something about the silence that made the trees feel closer, heavier. Elle told me not to be paranoid. She said I read too much. The living room was full of faded photos and strange oil paintings, all crooked, as if they'd shifted over time. No one spoke. The place smelled like dried flowers and something else, something faint and sour. In the hallway, there was a staircase wrapped in velvet rope. Devon ducked under it without hesitation. Elle followed. I hesitated. There was a strange humming sound coming from upstairs, like wind circling inside a sealed jar. I told myself I'd just go up, get them, and leave. The second floor was darker, colder. Devon opened a door at the end of the hall and stepped in. Elle stood by the wall, glancing back at me, unsure now. Then the door slammed. I ran toward them, but the handle wouldn't move. Elle knocked and called for him. No answer. We tried together, pulling, banging. The humming was louder now. The wallpaper around the door was peeling, revealing something drawn directly on the wood underneath. Symbols, circles, eyes. I took a step back, dizzy. Then everything shifted. Not just the light or the sound, but the feeling in my skin. It was like gravity changed direction. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the hallway was gone. I stood in a corridor of stone, lit by torches. The air smelled like smoke and old earth. Someone grabbed my arm. A boy about my age, dressed in rough fabric, his expression tight with fear. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. He pulled me forward as footsteps echoed behind us. We ran down a stairwell, through tunnels, past murals that moved ever so slightly when you looked away. His name was Callan. He told me this place had been buried for centuries, that people used to come here for answers, but most didn't return. He said a priestess lived below, that she knew how to manipulate time, that she marked her victims so they'd never leave. I told him about Devon and Elle. He looked down. "The woman you seek is not what she seems," he said. "She traps the curious, uses them." He said she feeds off fear, not death. I asked where the chamber was. He didn't answer. We reached a massive door, carved with symbols matching the ones I saw upstairs. I stepped forward, and the wood responded, cracking slightly under my palm. My vision blurred. Inside, it was quiet. Devon stood frozen in the center, eyes wide, but he wasn't seeing me. Elle was there too, crouched in a corner, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then I saw her. Not old, not young. She wore a veil that moved like water even in the still air. She stared directly at me, and I felt the world bend. She spoke without speaking, her voice somewhere behind my thoughts. "You do not belong here." I asked her to let them go. She tilted her head, curious. "You crossed willingly. Why would I return what you offered?" I told her I never agreed to any of this. Her form flickered. I stepped between her and Devon. She laughed, a sound that made the walls pulse. Then Callan entered, holding a lantern made of bone and thread. The flame inside pulsed blue. She flinched. He threw it at the floor, and the chamber screamed. The symbols lit up. The air cracked. I grabbed Devon's hand. Elle ran to us. We didn't wait. We rushed out, through the collapsing stone, through time itself. I blinked and found myself back on the porch. It was morning. The house was gone. Just an overgrown field where it used to be. Devon was coughing. Elle sat on the ground, pale but conscious. None of us said a word. Later, I found a mark on my wrist, a perfect circle with a line through it. Devon has one too. Elle doesn't remember anything. Sometimes at night, I hear the humming again, but I don't open the door. I hadn't planned on staying that late at the archives, but the rain was too heavy to drive back. I curled up on the dusty couch near the back and watched the storm light flash through the narrow windows. There was a warmth in the silence that made me feel oddly safe. Maybe I was just exhausted. The room smelled of parchment and cold stone. On the floor above, I could hear the faint shuffling of someone walking. I thought maybe Marcus was still around. He was the only one who enjoyed sorting old newspapers past midnight. I called his name once, twice, but got nothing back. Just the sound of rain hitting glass. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I should have left right then. I knew something was off. It was the way the shadows bent toward the hallway door, like something had passed through but didn't touch the ground. I waited, frozen, heart rattling against my ribs, until the silence settled back again. I didn't sleep. I sat upright with my coat wrapped tight around my shoulders. Every few minutes, the floor would creak upstairs, always in the same pattern, as if someone was pacing slowly between the records room and the stairwell. But no one ever came down. When the storm passed near 3 a.m., I got up to leave. As I passed the old bulletin board near the exit, I noticed a photo that hadn't been there before. 4 students, standing in the same hallway I'd just walked through. But the paper was old, yellowed, edges burnt. The year said 1921. I leaned closer. The girl in the middle looked like me. That was the last thing I saw before the light vanished. Not flickered, but blinked out completely, like someone had snapped their fingers. I turned, felt the floor shift. I wasn't in the archive anymore. I was still standing, but the walls had changed. No glass, no exit door, just wood. A voice called my name, soft, childlike. I spun around. The girl from the photo stood by the stairs, but she was wrong. Her mouth didn't move when she spoke again. Her eyes were hollow, not black, not empty, just wrong. I backed away slowly, one hand on the railing, trying to steady myself. My phone was gone. So was my coat. I was wearing a faded cotton dress that didn't belong to me. From behind the girl, 2 others stepped out. A man in suspenders, pale face, and a younger woman who looked confused more than anything else. Her name was Ada. I only know that because she said it as soon as she saw me. She wasn't like the others. Her eyes moved the way eyes should. She looked scared too. We hid in a narrow corridor behind a bookshelf. She whispered that this house wasn't a house anymore. It was a trap, built from memory, stitched together from the moments people disappeared. Every time someone entered, it recreated a version of their past. I had never been here before, but somehow it knew me. The man in suspenders moved slowly, as if he was tied to the creaking of the stairs. When we tried to pass him, time shifted again. The walls melted and we were back in a classroom. Slate boards, ink bottles, and the same girl, standing near the window, her head tilted like she didn't understand what she was. Ada took my hand and led me through the desk rows, whispering not to look at her directly. She said that's how they pull you in, through recognition, through memory. I didn't understand it fully, but I listened. We made it back to the staircase where light flickered above. There was a door now, one I hadn't seen before. As we reached for the knob, the girl screamed, not with sound, but with pressure. My ears popped, my knees gave out. But Ada pulled me forward, pushed the door open, and suddenly the cold was gone. I woke up in the archives, still sitting on the couch. My coat was back on my shoulders. The bulletin board was empty. No photo, just Marcus, standing near the shelves, asking if I'd fallen asleep. I never told him what happened. But when I went home that morning, I noticed something odd. A photograph had slipped out of my bag. 4 students standing in a hallway. One of them looked like Ada. One of them was me. Sometimes I still hear the floor creak upstairs, and I don't stay late anymore. I've learned that places remember, and sometimes they invite you to remember with them, whether you want to or not. I couldn't explain why I turned down the path behind the museum. It was just instinct, like my feet moved before my brain did. The sun had dipped, but the clouds hung thick, refusing to let the last light in. Colby called after me, but his voice felt far, like it belonged to another place. I didn't answer. My breath was tight, like I was walking into something that had been waiting far too long. Leah caught up, brushing her coat sleeve against mine. We didn't speak. Something about the air made it impossible to speak, without breaking whatever it was we had just stepped into. It was the gate, iron wrought, ivy-choked and rusted shut for years, maybe decades. But it was open, not swung or broken, just open, as if someone had unlocked it just moments before. I glanced at them, expecting protest, but neither said a word. We walked in. The garden was overgrown, tangled. The statues were headless or turned inward like they were ashamed. My heart was pounding now. Not fear, not yet. but the kind of pounding that said something was unraveling behind the scene of things, something I shouldn't see. Colby tripped first. He caught himself on a branch, then laughed nervously. But when we looked down, there was no root, no stone, just flat grass. Laya didn't laugh. I felt the pull next, like the air thickened around my shoulders, then pushed me forward. And the sky. It was still cloudy, but darker now, deeper somehow. Not night, but not day either. The garden opened up into a clearing, and there it stood. A house I knew didn't belong there. Tudor style, rotting, windows covered in paper from the inside. The chimney was still warm. Leah whispered she'd seen it before. She said she dreamed of it last fall during her illness. I wanted to say that was ridiculous, but the words never left my mouth. Colby stepped forward. The door creaked open. He swore he hadn't touched it. Then we all heard it, a piano chord. Not random, not clumsy. A single clean note, like an invitation. I followed. My hands trembled as I stepped inside. The house was dry, smelled of cinnamon and old paper. Dust floated like it was alive, shifting in slow spirals above the carpet. There were no pictures, no voices, just that feeling that something was behind you every time you looked ahead. Leah reached for my hand. Her skin felt cold, not like hers at all. The piano sat in the parlor, black, upright, closed. But when we approached, it opened on its own. The keys moved softly on their own, a tune I recognized from my childhood. I felt dizzy, like I had skipped years in a blink. When I looked back, Colby was gone. Leah stood still, frozen, eyes wide. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Something was in the mirror, not behind us. In the mirror, it looked like me. Same face, same eyes, but older. Pale, cracked around the mouth like porcelain. It moved when I didn't. Leah screamed. She didn't run, she just screamed. And that's when I felt something grab my shoulder. Not a hand, but heat. Like a furnace pressed to my skin, pulling me through the floor. Then silence. No house, no garden. Just a wide field, empty, under red-tinted clouds. My clothes were different. My hands were aged. My voice, when I tried to call, wasn't mine. A woman stood across the field. She was watching me, calm. I'd never seen her, but she looked like she'd known me for years. She said I wasn't supposed to be here. Before I could answer, she walked closer. She told me I'd crossed the threshold between memory and place, that I had called something forward by stepping into the house uninvited. She reached out, not to hurt, but to anchor. And then I blinked, and I was back. Back in the museum yard, just outside the fence. Colby was beside me. Leah was on the ground. She was breathing, eyes closed, whispering a name. It wasn't mine. I helped her sit up. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Or maybe she saw too much. The house was gone. Only wild ivy now. I wanted to believe we imagined it, that none of it happened. But my coat was singed. My hands were marked. The music still hummed in my ears. I never found that garden again. The museum staff said no gate ever stood there. Colby refused to speak of it. Leah moved out of state 3 weeks later. No goodbyes. Sometimes at dusk I smell cinnamon. Sometimes I see my reflection blink a beat too late. But I don't follow anymore. Not every place lost in time wants to be found. I didn't expect to see trees like that again. Giant oaks tangled in moss, reaching so high they blocked out the sky. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the alley behind my apartment anymore. I was barefoot, standing in soft dirt, still in the same clothes I wore to work. The air smelled wet, like old leaves and something I couldn't name. I turned around, dizzy, trying to understand where I was. Behind me stood an old house, tilted, silent, windows boarded shut. My heart beat in my ears. Then I saw her. She stood just beyond the porch, a pale girl with her arms folded tight. Her name was Elise. I didn't know how I knew that. She didn't move, but she wasn't frozen either. Her eyes twitched like she was tracking something I couldn't see. I called out, but no sound came. My mouth worked. My lungs burned, yet no voice. Elise slowly pointed toward the woods. Her hand shook. Then she vanished. A second later, branches snapped behind me. I ran, through trees and fog, stumbling over roots, losing my breath. I wasn't alone out there. I kept hearing something drag through the leaves, heavy, unnatural. I tripped near a hollowed tree trunk and fell hard. That's when I saw Daniel, a guy I'd seen earlier that day at the bus stop, leaning on his cane, always quiet. Except now he looked different, older, worn, his eyes knowing too much. He reached out and pulled me up without saying a word. We kept moving. The forest shifted with every step. The moon flickered like a dying bulb. Daniel didn't speak until we reached a clearing where an old well sat half covered in ivy. He looked at me, said just one thing: "You've seen her too, Elise." Something about this place wasn't right. Time felt broken, bent. The well pulsed faintly like it was breathing. I didn't want to go near it, but Daniel did. He said we had to send it back or we'd be stuck here. Before I could ask what it was, the ground opened. A shadow, long-limbed and wrong-shaped, pulled itself from the edge. Its face wasn't a face, just folds, stitched tight.